Hi everybody. There's a moment in the new Beatles Anthology episode 9 where Ringo says something like, my anthology would be different to Paul's anthology, different to George's anthology. And it got me thinking that he's absolutely right. Everybody's got their own idea of what the Beatles anthology should be. John no doubt would have had his own version had he been able to be around to control it. And it applies not just to the Beatles but to the fans as well. There's been an awful lot of comments about the anthology over the last week or two saying, why did they take this out? Why did they put this in? Why is this different? Why is that changed? And there is nothing that can please everybody with this. I could sit here and tell you exactly what I want from an anthology, but it wouldn't please anybody else. So I'm just gonna talk about what I like in the new anthology, what I don't like, but it doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that, in my version of the anthology, this is what it would have looked like. So I'm going to talk about the TV series. I'm going to talk about the albums. I'll go sort of fairly in chronological order of my journey with the new anthology. So when I went to pick up the albums from my local record shop, Revolution Records in Selby, I ordered the CD version. I'm not too bothered about having this on vinyl for reasons I'll go into in a moment. So I got the CD box set 1 to 4. I've got all 3 anthologies that I bought on the days that they came out in 95 and 96. But from what I'd heard, there was enough of a reason for me to get 1 to 3 again with the changes that they've made, the improvements that they've been able to make with the remastering and remixing, a little bit confusing there, process over the years. My first impression when this was brought out in the shop for me was, well, that looks better than I was expecting. I wasn't really expecting much from this as a presentation. So when I saw this, I was actually pretty pleasantly surprised. I'm not that bothered about that particular photograph there on that slip sleeve. Again, for me, I probably would have had a different photograph of the Beatles on there. But I actually quite like this as a package. I think this will look good on the shelf. It's pretty sturdy. I'm happy with this. So for, let's say CDs is what I like for this kind of album where I'm only ever really going to cherry pick the songs that I want to listen to at any given time. That to me doesn't lend itself to being something that I'm particularly bothered about listening to on vinyl. You'll see that I've got anthologies 1 and 3 up there. I've got 2 in the case. They're not original pressings, but they're the original anthologies 1 to 3. I've never actually played them, and I don't know if or when I will. So CDs for me for this kind of a release. So in terms of 1 to 3, what they've done, it was announced as being a remastered Beatles Anthology 1 to 3, and I'm one of those sort of pedants who's always sort of very clear on remastering and remixing and the difference between the two, and I don't like to get those terms interchanged incorrectly. But what I get the impression of, they say this has been remastered rather than remixed. And I was looking into remastering techniques, what they were, say 30 years ago when the anthology was originally done, what they are now. Remastering is a completely different thing now to what it was a few decades ago. You can almost do now in a remaster what you used to need a remix to do. It's got that good. So although it says remastered, and at first you might just think, oh well, they've just made it a bit louder, or they've just tweaked up the mid range or something like that. They've been able to do a lot with these songs on the remastering. There is quite a lot of the early songs on 1 to 3 that are now in stereo, or have had some sort of stereo effects applied to them that were in mono, that you can actually pretty much do with modern remastering techniques now. You never could have done that 30 years ago. Those early songs that were done in Percy Phillips' studio in Liverpool, like In Spite of All the Danger, That'll Be the Day, they do sound a lot better on here. There's a lot of the hiss has been removed. Now, again, back in the day, if you were going to remove tape hiss, for example, you were probably going to lose a lot of other good stuff at the time. Now they're able to do that a lot better. And I think those really, really early recordings, those first recordings, sound a lot better on 1 to 3. Ironically, there were certain things on on the 1 to 3, where actually there seem to be more tape hiss now than there was on the original 1 to 3 recordings, which was a little strange. But overall, I think 1 to 3 sound really good. And we've got on there on the remastered anthologies 1 and 2, we've got the new remasterings of Free as a Bird and Real Love. We've got to talk about those songs here. So I like the remastered versions, let's be clear. The remastered versions on Anthologies 1 and Anthologies 2. I like those. I've always been a huge fan of Real Love. Free as a Bird, yes, I've always really liked that song. Real Love, I've always loved that song. So I'm perfectly happy with the remasters of those. We've then got remixes of them on Anthology 4. So let's talk about this Anthology 4 that's come out. It was a bit of a mess, how it was all announced originally. At first saying, you've got to buy the box set, you've got to get 1 to 4, and then a week or so later backtracking and saying, well, actually, you can just buy number 4 on its own. Was it always planned to be that way and they were hoodwinking us? I don't know. Or did they actually make a mess of it and they had to backtrack? Either way, it was not a great look for Apple. It didn't look good for them, whichever one of those two intentions that they had. So Anthology 4, I'll come on to Free as a Bird and Real Love in a moment, but Anthology 4 has got essentially more of the kind of same stuff that you've got on Anthologies 1 to 3, except not really the live stuff. There's quite a bit of live stuff on Anthologies 1 to 3. This is more studio focused. Apart from the All You Need Is Love rehearsal, which is sort of a bit of a hybrid, I guess. And it's a strange one, is this. While I'm always going to love having more Beatle product, because I'm a Beatles fan, why wouldn't I want more Beatle product? It does feel like something of a missed opportunity, does Anthology 4. Now, it starts off great. We've got I Saw Her Standing There. It's very, very similar to the final released version that was on the Please Please Me album. It's still been worked on a little bit, but essentially, I mean, even Paul's vocal is almost identical throughout. So we've got some good things in here. I like this boy that's on here. I Need You, the sort of early take of I Need You is good, and it really sort of highlights why they needed to overdub those keyboards to accentuate that the chords that go da 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 da. Because without that, with just the guitar playing, the acoustic guitar, you can sort of tell the chords there, but it doesn't really reinforce it. It doesn't sort of slam it home like it does when you add the keyboard on top. So it's good to see that in an early version. I've Just Seen a Face just sounds so much more like skiffle on this version. They even make a comment at the start about something like, I wish Lonnie Donegan wishes he'd done this or something. But it really does sound... Whereas I think when it was eventually released, it had more of a sort of a country flavour to it. It feels like it's more skiffle based here. But it's a nice version. I do enjoy that. In My Life, really good first take of that. You can tell that the song is there. The song's complete. They're still learning it a little bit. They're still learning the how to accentuate the singing properly and get that across great. Obviously, George Martin's piano solo in the middle isn't there yet. That hasn't been done yet. But essentially, you see that the song's there fully formed, and that's really nice. And soon after that, this album becomes a massive missed opportunity, I think, because you don't need me to tell you that most of the stuff, not all of it, but most of what comes afterwards is on the deluxe versions of the Beatles albums that have come out over the last few years. And that does feel like a bit of a kick in the teeth. If you wanted the bonus tracks that are on those box sets, buy those box sets. So that is a bit of a shame. There's still some great stuff to be found. I love the I Am the Walrus orchestra overdub version that's on here. I'm a bit of a sucker for the sort of singled out or isolated orchestra parts. They've been used to great effect on some of the John Lennon box sets over the last few years. The Beatles have released a few of them, although for example, where you've got it on something here, strings only. You know, we had that in the Abbey Road box set. So it's nice to get an extra one, I Am the Walrus. I hope that doesn't mean that there's less chance of a Magical Mystery Tour sort of pre-India box set in the future. We will see. And yeah, so it feels like a bit of a missed opportunity, all the rest of it. There's so much other stuff that we could have had. Where's Revolution Take 20, for example? We got Take 18 in the White Album box set back in 2018, which is a really good take, don't get me wrong. But Take 20 is another level still. It's the one where it really is the sort of join between Revolution and Revolution 9. It's the end of that song becomes what would become Revolution 9, and it would be lovely to have an official release of that. So then, of course, at the end of this album, we've got brand new remixes of Free as a Bird and Real Love. And we've also got Now and Then. It's nice to have those three songs together, because they belong together, don't they? So what can we say about those two remixes of Free as a Bird and Real Love? So, of course, what they've done is they've taken the MAL technology originally used on Peter Jackson's Get Back to be able to isolate John's vocal from those really sort of hissy, bad quality tapes and, in theory, improve the voice. What they did on Now and Then, I absolutely love Now and Then. And my opinion of Now and Then as a song, it just keeps going up. I absolutely love it. I'd probably play that song more than I play any other song still at the moment. Free as a Bird, the remix of that, I quite like it. I quite like the remix. John's vocal obviously cleared up a lot. It cuts through a lot clearer than it does on the original 1995 version. And there's some of George's guitar parts, some of his rhythm parts that are very, very similar style. In fact, I had to listen a few times to see are they not identical to the rhythm guitar parts that you can hear come in during Now and Then. So there's definitely some accentuated guitars. They've changed around a few things. You know, we've got different. It's a different vocal take from George on his part. You can hear that he sings the word love instead of life. The end, at the end of the song, it hasn't got the flipped, reversed vocals that make it sound a bit like John saying John Lennon. That's not there. That's different. I don't mind it. I'm okay with Free as a Bird. You can sense there's a but coming, can't you? I'm okay with Free as a Bird. Real Love, 2025 mix. I don't understand it at all, really. Like I said before, I love that song. What they released in 1996, I think is fantastic. The remastered version that's on Anthology 2 here, great, lovely. They've polished it up a bit, but essentially it's exactly the same recording. I was never really a fan of the 2015 mix of Real Love that was on the Beatles 1 Plus box set. They'd messed around with the intro a lot and it sounded completely different to me. But this one, it just feels stripped of all the charm, everything that I loved, everything that was happy about the 1996 version just feels like it's been squashed. It's not there. John's vocal sounds like sometimes it sounds like it's double tracked, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it feels like has the Mal remix not brought out his voice properly? And I can't really say which of those it is. It just sounds odd and it sounds flat. There's various parts of George's guitar parts that just aren't there at the end, because I think it's something like 20 seconds shorter on this version than the original 1996 version. I don't understand it. I don't get it, and I'm probably not really fussed about listening to it much at all. I might only ever listen to it just as if I want a reminder of, do I really not like it? Oh yeah, I really don't like it. So I'm going to stick with the 1996 version and probably the remastered version that's in this box set as well. Like I say, I'm happy with that. Yeah, don't understand Real Love at all. So overall, for this 1 to 4 package, whether it's here on CD, whether it's on vinyl, I haven't heard the vinyl version, but there's plenty of people out there who've done reviews of the vinyl version specifically. You know, I'm really glad to have better quality copies, and I do believe they are better quality copies of what's on 1 to 3. And most of about half of this is great, lovely. The other half feels like a bit of a complete missed opportunity. So overall, you know, there's good to be had there. Could have been a lot better, I think. Now the TV series. So, like a lot of people, I've had this DVD box set since the moment it came out. I had the VHS box as well. I paid £100 for back in whenever that came out, back in the 90s. I ended up, I got rid of it. I couldn't even give it away to charity shops in the end. It was ridiculous. But I know this. I love this. I was excited to see the remastered version on Disney Plus. I've said for a while now that it's quite difficult to watch these on big modern TV screens, because if you think back in the 90s, TV screens would have all been in, what, if you had like a 27, 28 inch TV, that would have been good. I don't think we even really had 30 plus inch TVs back then. The graphics on a big sort of, let's say 60, 70, 80 inch TV look really bad on the original Anthology now. So it all needed cleaning up. I believe all the 1990s interviews were recorded to videotape rather than to film. But they've cleaned up. They look really nice on the new Anthology. What I didn't know was I going to sit down and watch an exact copy of the original Anthologies, or was it going to be different? My goodness, it's different in lots of ways. Is that a good or a bad thing? Well, I've often been a little bit puzzled by the intro to Anthology 1. I think it works very well for existing fans. You know, where you've got the opening screen of where they're playing Help and the camera pans back. It's that big grey background. And then you've got the shots of Liverpool, the Mersey, the camera goes down, it does In My Life and a montage. And then it cuts to the Beatles going, where they're recording Help. They're on the bikes in the Bahamas and they're going, let's go back. And it goes back in time to the beginning. I love that as a fan. I wonder how well that would translate to somebody new to the Beatles coming and looking at it with no prior knowledge. What is this Anthology? What are the Beatles even? You know, we're not, despite the fact we might like to think so, we're not ingrained with Beatles knowledge when we're born. If people haven't acquired this knowledge, people are going to come to it now new. And I just wonder whether that's an ideal opening for somebody who isn't a fan. But as a long-time Anthology fan, it was lovely to see that familiar intro. There's a lot changed in these episodes. And I found it much easier to identify the new bits, I don't remember that, not seen that before, than it was for me to think about what am I missing, what's been taken out that I haven't seen yet. I found that quite difficult. There are certain parts that are clearly missing, and you can sort of understand why. There was quite a bit of talk around sort of episodes maybe 3 and 4, where you've got the Beatles and George Martin talking about the supposed healing powers of the Beatles. Like children with like thalidomide victims, for example, would be brought in to be magically healed by the Beatles, as if that was a thing. Those things have been taken out, and I can sort of get why. You've got Ringo saying things, like they were bringing us, literal Green Day singles, for want of a better term, and it sort of makes sense that that's gone. I wondered as well whether they would get rid of all of John's on-stage antics. You know what I'm talking about, where he would mimic people with various disabilities. Have they got rid of all of that? Nearly, but not quite. They have left a little bit of it in, although it's not too obvious. It's on the the footage of the Washington DC concert, February 1964, the one with the revolving stage. There's a bit of an overhead shot where you do see John doing that still. So they nearly took it all out, but not quite. There was other certain bits where, for example, there's a nice little bit right towards the end of Anthology where the original Anthology, where they were talking about the breakup of the band, and Ringo's saying, you know, I don't remember it being like last album, last song, last take. That's gone, which I was a little bit surprised about. Okay. The one thing that was cut out that, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I don't remember seeing this because I was specifically looking out for it. A bit that I've always really liked is of George, where it's during, when they're playing Hey Jude on the David Frost show, and it's during the long outro to the song, the big na 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 na, Hey Jude bit. And I can't remember if it's the back end of episode 7 or the start of episode 8. George sort of talks about how, you know, they reached a peak, and then it all started to come down from there. That's a really nice bit in the original Anthology that's not there. That was a shame. But I think I'm nitpicking a little bit here because there is so much new stuff in these episodes. So much new, not new, but recorded at the time, interviews with Paul, George, Ringo, that are in here now that weren't in originally. And, you know, if I'm going to think, would I want it to have been released exactly as this is, which I love, or would I like to see a lot of new footage with some other things not put in? I think overall I'd like to see the new stuff that I'm not familiar with. You know, we've got 2 different anthologies now, and I realise that's not an opinion that everybody's going to share. Like I said right at the start, you know, everybody's got their own vision of what the anthology should be. It's going to be different for everybody. I really liked all the new stuff that we had in terms of interviews from the boys, and especially seeing more George. That was pretty special. Which sort of brings me on to episode 9. No, it doesn't. I'm going to come back to episode 9 in a second. I'm just going to talk about the picture quality for a moment. The picture quality generally on this new anthology is superb. I really love what they've done with so much of it. Now, there is a couple of places where it goes a bit weird. You can tell they've used AI to try and make it better picture quality, and I would say 95+% of the time, for me, I think it looks great. A couple of times, there was once during one of the 1963 live sections where it all went a bit odd. There was a couple of bits later on where it went a little bit odd as well. But overall, picture quality, I think, is superb. They've done a great job on it. The one bit that actually looked better than anything wasn't Beatles related at all. It was when they were talking about The Family Way. This is my DVD copy of it, which obviously Paul went and did the music for in 1966 while everybody else was going off and having a bit of a holiday. My God, the clips that they showed from that film looked absolutely amazing. I think I need to throw this DVD out and get a Blu-ray of that if that's what that looks like. It was sensational. So yeah, picture quality, great. Anyway, on to episode 9, the new episode of Anthology. Again, there was a bit of an unknown going into this. What's it going to be? Is it going to be all footage of Paul, George and Ringo in the studio in the 1990s? Personally, I'm going into it thinking, I really hope it is. And it's not entirely that, although there is a lot of that in there. And again, it's great to see. For example, there's a lot of George stuff in here. There's some really interesting George moments in this Anthology episode 9. He talks, for example, about the Travelling Wilburys and an idea that they'd had originally when after Roy Orbison died. There was a thought of, we're going to bring somebody else in or whatever. There was talk of actually getting Elvis recordings and the Travelling Wilburys playing over Elvis singing and having Elvis as a sort of a virtual member of the Travelling Wilburys. Obviously, it never happened, and I think I'm glad it didn't. But George was saying how that's, one of the ideas that led them to start to think about, well, could we do something with John? and obviously they then went to get the tapes from Yoko so that they could record those old demos of John's. So that was really interesting to hear. And just great having a lot more George in there. So the start of episode 9 is like it's a bit like Paul, George and Ringo looking back on the anthology and the process of the anthology and how it came about, which is really interesting. If we think about how long ago those sessions were that they did, all those interviews and the music sessions that they did, it's a similar time frame really to, let's say, A Hard Day's Night to Anthology. And, you know, A Hard Day's Night was a period piece then. The original Anthology is that old now. So I think it's great to look on that as a piece of history in itself. So I really loved seeing all that stuff, all the extra footage of them in the studio, playing, recording the songs. So they do quite a sort of a bit of an in-depth talk about Free as a Bird and how that came about, the recording of it. We hear them doing similar with Real Love. I was surprised that they didn't go on and do more for Now and Then. It was sort of left out. Is that because Now and Then didn't feature in the original anthology? That they decided they didn't want to talk about it? There was also, when Now and Then came out, there was a little bit of a sort of a making of film that came out. Maybe they thought that, well, that serves that purpose. But I was sort of expecting them to talk more about Now and Then than what they did. But episode 9, I absolutely loved it. Hearing George talk about how, for example, he felt sorry for John, the fact that John never got that amount of time between the Beatles splitting up and for it to be able to come full circle for them to all be friends again. And you could really tell a closeness between Paul and George. I've always found the dynamic between Paul and George fascinating in various eras, going right back to the end of the Yellow Submarine film in 1968. There's some looks in George's eyes when it's the real life Beatles at the end of the film. There's some looks in George's eyes that you think he's annoyed with Paul today. And ever since, from that point onwards, I've been fascinated about George's relationship with Paul. So it's great to hear George just talking pretty lovingly, and you can tell he's really enjoying being in the company. You see them laughing in the studio, laughing while they're being interviewed together, and I think, yeah, much more than I'd ever realised, it looked like George had made his peace with Paul and enjoyed spending time with him again. There's a nice bit where Paul, George and Ringo are sat in chairs and they're talking about, George was talking about, we might go out on a stadium tour next year. Paul goes, yeah, mud wrestling. And they're just very comfortable in each other's presence. So Anthology 9 is something that I think I will watch pretty regularly. I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite emotional seeing what, especially the George stuff, because that was great to see how he'd come full circle. And him talking about the fact that, unfortunately, John never really got a chance to do it to that same extent. Anthology 9, complete and utter thumbs up from me. I love it. So, I need to go back and rewatch Anthology again, all 9 episodes on Disney Plus, and just really sort of drink it all in. What are those new things? What are the things that are missing? I probably need to go back and watch this as well and probably get myself annoyed about, oh God, that wasn't in the new one. Why wasn't this bit in the new one? But overall, I think I'm glad that they've put more new stuff in, because more new Beatles stuff, what's not to love? So I would love to hear your thoughts on Anthology, and I don't expect them to be the same as mine, because, as a theme of this video, right from my very opening sentence, was that we've each got our own opinion of what the anthology should be. And maybe there's certain things that they took out that they just didn't think were as relevant anymore. And if it's so that you can get more George talking about the Beatles, for example, well, okay, I'm pretty cool with that, even if some people aren't. Let me know what you think anyway, down below. And thank you very much for watching. If you want to know a Beatles story that you've never heard before, and I promise you've never heard it before, unless you've watched this video, this might give a little bit of an explanation into how Klaus Vormann thought about the Anthology montage cover. Have a watch. Bye.